Hi everyone, it's Alice, and today I'm gonna wrap up all of the books that I read in August. I'd say that this was a pretty solid reading month. Even if I didn't love everything that I read, I did enjoy everything, which is great. And we do have a new 5-star read this month, which is always exciting. It's been nice to just lean into sort of like summer reading. I had some time off of work, which was great, and yeah, we should probably just get into it. The first book that I finished was The Fury by Michaelides. This is a mystery thriller, and it's about this group of friends who gather on this private island that belongs to this reclusive movie star, and they're going there just to get away from everything. And the trip takes a little bit of a turn when someone is murdered. This is my third book by this author, and in a lot of ways the reading experience was very much what I thought it was going to be. Like, I enjoyed it, and there were some really good elements in here, but it's very much a book I just read, enjoyed, and that was kind of it. I do think this has an interesting narrative voice, which makes it feel a little bit different from your traditional mystery, maybe. It's kind of meta, for a lack of a better word. Like, it's the kind of writing where it addresses you as the reader, and the writer is one of the characters. Like, that's the style. I thought that was an interesting choice. It took me a little bit of time to get used to, but I did get into it. I do also really like the setting of this. Like, there's a lot of atmosphere in the settings, both on and off the island. And the mystery was quite twisty, especially towards the end. It's maybe a little bit over the top. I'm saying maybe. It is over the top. And you maybe have to suspend your disbelief a little bit. I don't really struggle with that. So I thought it was fun. I found this book to be quite engaging, and there is something compulsive about the way it's written that just made me want to keep reading. I do think the characters, though, I don't really know. I feel like I didn't really get to know them, and I didn't really get under their skin, really. Even like the narrator, who a lot is revealed about throughout the book, I don't feel like I really got under anyone's skin, so I missed that a little bit. And I do think that the pacing is like a little bit wobbly. Like, I think it could have been a little bit tighter. It feels very much like a 3 out of 5 star read for me, which a lot of books do, but it's just very much one of those books that I read, enjoyed, I had a good time reading it. It was just kind of like light and fun and summery, and that was kind of it. The second book that I finished was The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. This is a sort of literary mystery, I would call it, and it starts off in 1975 at this summer camp where one of the camp counselors wakes up to find one of the kids missing, specifically a 13-year-old girl who happens to be the daughter of the wealthy family who owns the camp. And to make it even worse, it's not the first time that one of the kids in that family has gone missing, because like 14 years earlier, that 13-year-old's brother went missing, never to be found. Now, I had pretty high expectations of this book because I've read 2 other books by this author and I've loved both. So I went into this really expecting amazing things, and I am amazed at the fact that it managed to live up to those expectations. So much so that it's my favorite book that I've read by this author, and it's definitely one of the best books that I've read all year. I'm calling it a literary mystery though, because that is really what it feels like to me. Yes, we have some mysteries in here, there's more than one, and that is what is driving the story forward, but we're really spending a lot of time with the characters, and we're exploring all kinds of different characters, and we get some of their backstories, and we get to read about their relationships between all of these people and how everything is connected. And I think that's why it works so well for me, because yes, there is a plot, yes, there are these intriguing mysteries, but we're spending a lot of time with the characters, and they are so well done. The fact that the book focuses so much on the characters maybe in a way slows down the book a little bit, but I think it also, like, the reason that it works is that it also creates so much tension as you're reading, and things are slowly revealed to us, and we find more things out about all of these different people and how everything is connected, and it builds this amazing tension that just, at least for me, because of that, I just couldn't stop reading this book. The atmosphere is also excellent. Obviously the setting of a summer camp is really good, but just the way that everything is described, like the camp and the woods and just the rural community and all of that, like all of it is really well done and it really pulls you into the story, I feel. I'm also really glad that I just went and got this book and read it while it was still summer, because it is set mostly in summer, and I'm the kind of person who really likes reading. Like, if a book is set in a season, I like reading it in that season. I know that that's not a thing for everyone, but for me, it really added to the reading experience. I think this book is just expertly crafted. Like, that's the best way to describe this book. Everything just works, at least for me. Like, it's really well written. I love the characters. I love the setting. There's so much tension. The mysteries are really intriguing. And it was just kind of perfect for me. It's a very clear 5 out of 5 star read for me. Definitely one of the best books that I've read this year, and I would highly, highly recommend it. And honestly, it might be a new favorite. Like, it really is that good. I almost feel like I had a little bit of a book hangover after The God of the Woods, though, and it's always hard to know what to read next after those books because you almost feel a little bit lost. But I feel like the next book that I picked up was the right choice. It was Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. This is a classic, and it tells the story of Anne, who is adopted by this brother and sister who initially wanted a boy to help out where they live, but instead, sort of by mistake, they're sent Anne, who is this red-haired girl with a little bit of a temper and a lot of imagination. I'm so glad that I finally got around to reading this book. It's a classic I've been meaning to get to, and unlike a lot of people, I didn't grow up with this book. I feel like my main classic when I was growing up was The Secret Garden, and I just never found this one. But actually, I can imagine this having like sort of the same effect on children as The Secret Garden had on me, because they have some of the same vibes, even though they're very different. But I'm glad I read it now, and even for adults, I think this is a really good read. I loved finally getting to meet Anne, and she's just a character that is so full of life. Like, she feels so alive, and seeing everything through her eyes is just amazing. Everything is so beautiful and romantic when you see it from her perspective, and also sometimes desperately sad and horrible. And I feel like we really went on all of these ups and downs with her. It was also just a lot of fun to read. Like, it was really enjoyable to go on all of these adventures with Anne and seeing her grow up a little bit. I also love the setting of this, and I love the way that it's described. I feel like I could really picture it. And I've never been to Canada. I don't know what this place is supposed to look like. It is set on an island that is real. I have no idea what it looks like, but it was very vivid in my imagination. And just the way everything is described, especially the seasons, it's beautiful. I also didn't know that the quote, "I'm so happy to live in a world where there are Octobers," I may be paraphrasing that, but like that quote, I've always loved that quote, and I don't know where I thought it was from, but I didn't know it was Anne. I think I would have loved this as a child, but I do also love it as an adult. It's not quite a 5-star read, it's a very, very solid 4-star, but I think maybe on a reread it would be 5 stars. And it's definitely a book that I want to reread several times, because it's just such a lovely book and such a lovely world, and I would love to revisit it. After that, I read a book that I just sort of randomly picked up in a bookstore. It's The Gentleman from Peru by André Aciman. And this is a fiction book with kind of like a romance in it. This book is really difficult to describe because I feel like the blurb doesn't really tell you what the book is, but I also can't tell you what the book is because then I just give the whole thing away. But it's basically about this group of friends who are stranded on the Amalfi Coast because their boat is being repaired, and they check into this luxury hotel and they spend some time there. And at this hotel, there's also this mysterious gentleman from Peru who has all of this wisdom and some miraculous abilities. I feel like that doesn't really give you a lot, but yeah. Very hard to describe this book, but it also has some magical realism in it, I guess you would call it. I picked this up because I wanted to read something else by this author, and I decided to just read it right away because it has a very summery cover, and it was quite a quick read. It's pretty short. I think I read this in like a day. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure what to think of this book, but I have thought about it a couple of times since I finished it, so it definitely has something to it. I do think I maybe expected something a little bit different, because the other book that I've read by this author is Call Me By Your Name, and that book has a very specific, like, super intense writing, and this, I didn't really feel like it had that same magic to it, because I don't feel like we get to know the characters in quite the same way. I do get that in Call Me By Your Name you get like really deeply under the skin of the characters, and that's a very specific thing, and I guess I shouldn't have expected that from such a short book, but I think I expected a little bit more from the writing. It was an interesting story though when I sort of managed to wrap my head around what was actually happening. And there is a romance in here, but it is a little bit of a different kind of romance. And again, I can't really get into it because I don't want to spoil it, but I thought that was interesting. It's an interesting twist on a romance story. And this like weird, interesting gentleman from Peru was a very interesting character. I don't know though, I don't quite know what to make of this. I definitely did expect more from the writing, but I also didn't expect this like weird and interesting story. So that like caught me off guard, and that was really interesting. And it is like weirdly romantic in sort of like an odd way that I do really like. So I don't quite know about this. I think I'm gonna have to think about it a little bit, but it's somewhere between like a 3 and 4 star read for me. And it was interesting and a little different. And like there is something romantic about the story and the style and the setting that I did really like. Second to last, I read another short book that is also like a short fiction romance. This is Until August by Gabriel García Márquez. And this is about this woman whose mother has died, and she has requested to be buried on this island. And every August, her daughter goes to this island to visit the grave. And after a few years, on this like yearly trip, this daughter starts taking like a lover every time she's there, even though she's happily married. And this thing that keeps happening, it sort of is the beginning of her unravelment. It's always hard with these kinds of like shorter books to accurately describe them without giving too much away, but yeah, this was interesting. And this is an interesting book to have been published, because this was published a decade after this author passed away, and this is the last thing that he worked on. And he said that he didn't want to publish it. And there's a note in the beginning of the book where like his children, they're the ones who have decided to publish it, and they talk a little bit about that and why they decided to. And there's an editor note, like an editor thing in the back, that also talks a little bit about why they decided to publish it. And it's interesting that it was, and yeah, it's just interesting. I haven't read a lot from this author. I've read one other book, which was also quite short, but it was very good. And I wasn't really expecting a lot because I also knew that this was published after he passed away. And it was an interesting story, and it was a little bit weird, and I did like it. The thing is though, I have thought more about the fact that this book was published and the note in the beginning and the editor's thing at the end. I've thought way more about that than the actual story since I finished this. And I think it's because I never really know like how I feel about that kind of thing, like how I feel about someone else publishing someone's work after they've died and they've specifically said don't publish this. But it's also interesting because this author got dementia at the end of his life, so there's a little bit of talk about that. Like, it's just very interesting, and I've thought way more about that than the actual story, and I feel like I could have read a whole book just about that. For the actual story though, there were some beautiful segments in the writing, and it's a good novella, and I'm glad that I read it, but it didn't like blow me away. It has reminded me though that I need to read something else by this author as well. I think I have at least one book by him on my shelves that I've had for ages that I still haven't read, that I really need to. But yeah, I'm glad I read this. 3 out of 5 stars. Then lastly, I read a nonfiction book. It was The Art Thief by Michael Finkel. And this is a true crime biography, I guess. And it's about one of the most prolific art thieves ever who stole like millions of dollars worth of art, not to sell or make money on or anything, but just to have. I really like true crime books that are about stuff like this, like heists and stealing and things like that. And that's the reason that I picked this up, and I'm really glad that I did because I really enjoyed it. I think this is just a fascinating case, and I thought it was really interesting to read about this guy and the people around him, and he's the main thief, but he also has this girlfriend who sort of like helps him, but then she's also an interesting character. But we focus mainly on this guy and what he did, how he did it, and also a little bit why he did it. And he has his opinion on why he did it, and then we also delve a little bit into the psychology behind it. And he's been interviewed by psychologists and stuff like that, and they share some of their opinions, which are also kind of different, and it's just very interesting. Like, the audacity of this guy is like something else. We also get to read about different museums, and actually quite a lot about museum security, which a lot of that was news to me. And there is quite a lot about art in here, obviously, because he stole all of this art, and I really like reading about art, so I really enjoyed that. There's also these photos in the middle of some of the works, which I really enjoyed. And there is a drawing of the rooms where they put all of this stuff, because like I mentioned, they didn't sell any of it. They just, I mean, I say he kind of just wanted to have it. And they've drawn, like, there's a map of where they stole freaking everywhere. And there is this illustration of the rooms where they put all of this stuff. Like, they put millions of dollars worth of art in 2 small rooms. It's so weird, but it's so interesting. It's also just really easy to read, which I liked. I don't think it's perfect though. I think there are a couple of things that I thought of. The first thing is, I think that the first like half drags a little bit, because we spend the first half of this book just sort of discussing the different thefts, and there's something sort of repetitive about it. And yes, it shows like the scope of it, and it shows how it sort of came to a head, but I felt like some of that was a little bit repetitive. The other thing is, and this isn't it's not the fault of the book or the author, so I can't really fault it for it, but I sort of missed having more perspectives in here than just the guy, and I missed having more information about the girlfriend and the mother of this guy, actually. But it's not the author's fault that they didn't want to speak to anyone and they haven't told their story. But I think it would have been even more interesting if we got those perspectives and we got a little bit more information about them, because they are also very interesting, because they're so different from the main thief, but they were also kind of a part of it. And it's just, yeah, I think it would have really blown my mind if we got to read from those perspectives as well. But again, it's not the book's fault. I did really like it though, and I found it to be very enjoyable. And it definitely picks up in the second half. Like, we get a little bit away from the repetitive stuff, and I really enjoyed that as well. And it was just interesting. I feel like it's a very solid 4 out of 5 star read. I really like books like this, so that's not really surprising. And yeah, it's pretty wild, like, how they were able to get away with all of this stuff, and how just by remaining calm and being able to see opportunity and sort of gauge risk, and just by acting like not like a thief, you're able to get away with so much. Hopefully not anymore. This happened in the late 90s and early 2000s, so maybe hopefully security now in museums is way better. One would hope. That was the last book that I finished though. A good reading month for sure, but now I'm ready to get into all of those autumn books. I have so many books that I want to get to and not a lot of time, so wish me luck. Anyways, I'd love to hear all about what you all have been reading lately, and as always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!